What is up everyone, Psych Up is starting later today, so in this video I'll be breaking down the meta and showing you some good teams to run to get ready for it. Psych Up will be played in the Great League, only allows you to run Pokemon with a Psychic subtyping, and Mew is banned. To give you a better view of what kind of meta this creates, I've created this extremely high quality infographic which we will go over right now. This is basically a view of all the Pokemon that are sort of viable, but honestly we're gonna be erasing a bunch of these as we go through, as there really is a pretty clear top meta, I would say. So let me explain how this graphic works. Basically we got most of the meta Pokemon on the left here. Some I've divided into categories for Pokemon that do similar things, which is indicated by the white circle around them, and then the arrows, black, white, doesn't really matter, indicate the interactions between different categories or individual Pokemon. For example, we got the Fairy slash Charmer group over here, and they lose to the Anti-Charmers, the Fire types, the Steel types, the Poison types in the Anti-Charm group here, and that's indicated by this here arrow. Then we got the pure Psychic types over here, and they have a pretty even matchup versus the Fairy slash Charmers, so we got a double pointing arrow here, and we're just gonna go over all of these one by one, and I'll tell you a little bit about each and every Pokemon. Let's start with this group over here, the Anti-Fairies. They do what the name says, they beat the Fairies over in this group. Besides that, they're quite good against the pure Psychic types as well. However, they lose very hard to Mud Slap Claydol over here. Against Malamar, they're not amazing either, but most of them do have some play. The top picks from this group will be Victini, who's just an amazing closer in this meta. With Quick Attack, you're doing neutral damage versus most Pokemon in this cup, and you just get to the V-Create so quickly, and they do a ton of damage versus everything. You wanna have shields down though, because Victini is kinda squishy and it doesn't do too much damage with fast moves, so it's gonna rely on those charge moves. You're gonna want shields down to make the most use of it. Because, for example, when you have 2 shields up, you still lose to a Shadow Gardevoir. It just charms you all the way down. So not as solid as a Charmander as some of the others, but once you get 1 shield down, at least Victini is an absolute star. Talk about an actual star, Jirachi. I'm just gonna remove it right now. It's alright, but it's not as good as a Bronzong, for example. Bronzong, absolute like monster in this meta, is running Feint Attack, Payback, and Psyshock. Weird moveset, not something you usually run on Bronzong, but in the Psychic Cup, it's the way to go, because Feint Attack hits almost everything for super effective, besides, well, the Fairy types, of course, and the Dark types, but those you are hitting for neutral. With Feint Attack, you can just farm everything down. It does super well versus the Fairies, of course. It does super well versus the Psychics too, especially Cresselia. Cresselia gets fully walled by Bronzong. Nothing Cresselia can do. Hypno is a little bit more of an issue because you can get hit by a Shadow Ball, but even there, they can't get the 2 Shadow Balls before you Feint Attack down. So Bronzong, absolute monster. Then we got Slow King, who's really good too. It's a Poison Psychic type, so unfortunately you do take neutral from the Psychic moves. However, you are running Hex and Shadow Ball, so you're doing like super effective versus most things besides Malamar over here. It is kind of slow compared to some of the other Pokemon in this meta, which means it can kind of fall short in like the 2-shield scenario. So again, another Pokemon you'd probably want to get shields down for, so you can start Shadow Balling things to death. You also got Slowbro over here. It's a bit of a side grade to Slowking, honestly. Definitely falls short. It doesn't have Hex, it doesn't have Shadow Ball. It's just gonna run like Poison Jab, Sludge Bomb. Not the best, honestly. I'm gonna remove this one too, just because Slowking is a lot better. Now, Metagross is quite interesting. I don't expect Metagross to be super meta, but it is the hardest Fairy answer out there. It can just volley, bullet punch every single one of these down and have a bunch of energy loaded. And a Meteor Mash or an Earthquake is gonna do a ton of damage versus whatever comes in. So this is not a Pokemon you should really rely on that much, but if you can farm something down, it can be an absolute monster. So these 4 are the ones I'd recommend. With like a big bias towards Victini and Bronzong. Those are the absolute best in this meta, in this group. Then Slowking can work as well. And Metagross, pretty niche, but could be a fun pick too. Next up, the fairies here. Galarian, Rapidash, and Gardevoir are gonna be your picks. You can definitely run Charm, Gothitelle, Wolfette, and Gallade too. They are gonna work, but I feel like they're definitely gonna fall short to Galarian, Rapidash, and Gardevoir. So even though they can definitely work, I'm gonna move them off the graphic for now because they just aren't as meta as these two beautiful monsters over here. Even though these two share a typing of Fairy Psychic, they are completely different. Gardevoir, you're generally gonna want to run a Shadow and just do as much damage with Charm as possible. Give Shadow Gardevoir one shield and it just charms down most of the meta, besides the anti-charmers, which Gardevoir just has no play against. Galarian Rapidash, on the other hand, has to rely on his charge move. You want to run it with Fairy Wind as your fast move, and then Body Slam and Mega Horn as your charge moves, most likely. And with this moveset, it even has play versus the Anti-Fairies. Yes, even Bronzong, who resists Fairy Wind, Body Slam, and Mega Horn only does neutral, loses the one shield versus Galarian Rapidash if you can manage to get a bait off with it, which is just really, really good. And the same counts for these others. Actually, Metagross just bullet punches down Galarian Rapidash if you use one shield, so that's the benefit of Metagross here. But the rest can all just, you know, straight up die to a Mega Horn, which is really, really cool. So if you want a fairy that just relies on fast move damage, go Gardevoir. If you want a fairy that relies on charge move pressure and is more flexible, go Galarian or Rapidash here. Overall, they still have very similar matchups though. I think the biggest difference is that Shadow Gardevoir absolutely obliterates Galarian Rapidash when shields are up. Shields down, that's not a great matchup for Gardevoir, but give it one shield and you just straight up charm down the horse. Besides that, very similar. You are very even versus the Psychic types, though this is actually where Galarian Rapidash does a little better. You both defeat Hypno if shields are up, and Galarian Rapidash can actually beat Cresselia in every single even shield scenario, but it does require baiting. That's a downside, but Gardevoir just doesn't beat it. Like, Cresselia is one of the only Pokemon in this meta that doesn't resist Charm and is still able to beat Gardevoir when two shields are up, just because Cresselia is so freaking bulky. They both beat Claydol too. Rapidash is a bit bait dependent though. If they shield a Mega Horn, that's kind of painful, but you should still be able to get the two of them. Gardevoir can just one shield, straight charm down. You win that matchup. They both defeat Malamar as well. Obviously, that's where Gardevoir is a little more consistent, as you can just straight up charm down before they get the two foul plays. Whereas with Galarian Rapidash, you're definitely gonna have to throw some charge moves to take out the Malamar. The pure Psychics. We've already talked about them a little bit. We got Cresselia, we got Hypno. They're both going to be very good. I'd rate them about equally in this meta. Hypno, of course, has access to Shadow Ball, which is very nice in the Psychic Cup, because you're going to be hitting almost everything for super effective, besides like Malamar, which you're hitting for neutral, and then, of course, the normal Psychics, which you're going to be hitting for resisted. But besides that, Shadow Ball is going to one-shot almost everything, which is really good. However, Hypno has one problem, and that is confusion. It's just not a good move in a Psychic Cup, as most things are gonna resist it, or even double resist it, or even triple resist it. So it's just not gonna put in the damage it would normally do, and it just doesn't charge quickly enough to the Shadow Ball to really make an impact when shields are up. If you're gonna be playing Hypno, you really need to get shields down first. One or ideally two shields down and Hypno will go to town, but shields up? No. Okay, Cresselia does better when shields are up though. Much better, since Cresselia has Psycho Cut as a fast move, which just allows it to charge up to the charge move quite quickly. It has Moonblast, it has Grass Knot. Moonblast is very nice for something like Malamar. Because of that, you actually have a lot of play versus Malamar, while Hypno just straight loses. However, its moveset does make it get hard-walled by Bronzong and a lesser hard-walled by Victini. Hypno actually has play here versus Victini and Bronzong because of the Shadow Ball. Cresselia can only throw resisted moves, which is not too good. However, It is much better versus something like Gardevoir, since it's so tanky. You can also hit Grass Knolls on Claydol, which really helps. So overall, like, I don't know which of these two you really want to pick. I think if you're gonna expect to get shields down, go for Hypno, since you can Shadow Ball everything. If you need the bulk, if you expect to run Cresselia or a Pure Psychic when shields are up, probably go Cresselia, but you will have to build very strong against Bronzong and Victini, otherwise you're really gonna be in trouble. Then we got two super unique Pokemon in Claydol and Malamar. Claydol is gonna be running Mud Slap, Shadow Ball, and most likely a Rock Tomb as your second charge move. And with that moveset, you just absolutely obliterate the Anti-Fairies, and you do decent versus everything else as well. Mud Slap is kind of a below average move, especially when it comes to charging up energy, so generally you will lose to the Charmers or the Fairy types and the Pure Psychics and even Malamar, but you will be able to make those matchups close. So overall, Claydol is a very good specialist to take out the Anti-Fairies, but it will be a bit lackluster versus everything else basically. Next up, Malamar. Super unique Pokemon in this meta, dark psychic typing, able to triple resist any psychic move you throw at it, which is just insane, and able to hit back with super effective foul plays too. There's only one thing holding back Malamar, and that is Psycho Cut, which, I mean, isn't a bad move. It charges up to this foul play super quickly, but it barely does any fast move damage, and foul play isn't like the strongest move either. So generally you're gonna need 2 or maybe even 3 foul plays to knock some of these Pokemon out, and in that time frame a lot of them can do a bunch of damage back to Malamar as well. You actually end up losing versus Victini, since Quick Attack plus V-Create will knock out Malamar, whereas Victini can tank the Psycho Cuts plus foul play, take a bunch of damage from Bronzong still too. And well, talking about, you know, actual answers, the Fairy types absolutely destroy Malamar, especially Gardevoir. It's like 4 or 5 charms, I think, and Malamar just gets destroyed. It doesn't do amazing versus Cresselia either, because Cresselia can hit back with the Moonblast, but it does absolutely destroy Hypno, since Hypno just only has like neutral moves and Confusion, of course. So Malamar gonna be an amazing generalist in this meta, but you definitely gotta make sure you pair it with some Fairy answers, and that should know how to deal with some of these Anti-Fairies as well. Everything on the left side I just talked about will be the main meta, but there are some decently good picks in this section on the right here as well. We got Lugia, who can just put on a lot of damage versus everything with Dragon Tail, but it gets held back because it just gets destroyed by Bronzong and the Fairy types. Then we got Alolan Raichu, which, well, Thunder Punch Wild Charge combination can hit so many of these Pokemon for super hard damage. If to beat Victini, it's even pretty decent versus Bronzong, but it's quite squishy, so just gets charmed down by Gardevoir, and you know, you really don't want to see a Claydol. Medicham, even though it's a fighting type, it actually does quite okay in a Psychic meta. Does very good against this thing, Malamar. You can Ice Punch Claydol. You actually beat Bronzong because you do neutral counters. But of course, the Pure Psychics and Rapidash and Gardevoir are going to be a big problem. Latios, when shields are up, is actually quite a monster. If you don't face a Fairy type or Bronzong or Metagross, you can almost just Dragon Breath and Dragon Claw through everything when shields are up. So definitely a pick you could consider, but not amazing. We got Oranguru over here. It has Foul Play too, which is super effective versus most, but it suffers the same issue as Hypno, where it has Confusion. So it's just not going to get to those foul plays quickly enough to really make a dent when shields are up, but definitely an option you could consider. Same as Girafarig. It's interesting. It has double kick, actually, tackle. Actually, you're probably going to want to run tackle. Tackle plus Psychic Fangs is an interesting moveset, but I don't think it's going to make a dent really, but it will be a good Hypno answer for sure. And then we got Slowbro, which is really only here since it's the hardest wall to Victini. It just absolutely destroys Victini with Water Gun and well, that's all you need really. You resist everything Victini throws at it, except for quick attacks. And besides that, you can also take out Claydol. Water Guns will add up versus Malamar, but you still lose. If the pure Psychics, you also lose, but you can put in damage. And you're also just going to get Charmed down, but you will put in a lot of Water Gun pressure in between. So overall, these are not Pokemon I necessarily recommend, but they can put in a lot of work when put into the right spot. Overall, definitely just stick to these. What are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 months though. These are gonna be the core meta. But anyway, enough about that. Let's get into the teams. I got 2 extremely solid cores to show you today. Starting off with what's probably gonna be my favorite duo to run, Victini Malamar. I've always loved these 2 Pokemon, and now they're gonna be able to shine together, which is awesome. They basically cover each other perfectly. Victini only really hard loses to Claydol and Slowbro, which Malamar will defeat. And Malamar really only loses hard to the Fairies, which Victini beats. So yeah, pretty good core. One worry is Shadow Gardevoir, because Shadow Gardevoir can charm through Victini if Gardevoir uses 2 shields. However, Victini brings it low enough with the quick attacks to where as long as you have something decent against a Charmer in the back, you are gonna be fine. So that brings us to my first team, which is Bronzong behind Malamar. And in this team, I think you want to lead with the Malamar, since of course both Victini and Bronzong are going to be weak against Claydol. So this is going to be an ABB style line. You lead with the Malamar. If you don't see a Claydol, perhaps you're going to want to switch into your Bronzong at some point to maybe lure it out. Bronzong actually wins the zeros against Claydol, since you get to the payback and that will knock him out. Once you've lured out the Claydol, Malamar can clean it up. Then you've probably gotten a shield down and Victini can just sweep. Second team is a little bit weaker against the Shadow Gardevoir. If you were to face a Shadow Gardevoir in the lead here and they double shield, that's kind of devastating, since then they will still be able to do a lot of damage versus Galarian Rapidash. But the thing is, they've used 2 shields at this point. So you just body slam the Gardevoir then, and once the Gardevoir is gone, Malamar can just shine. So in this team, if you have a bad lead, switch to Rapidash. It's an amazing pivot. Even if a Bronzong comes out, you have a ton of play there. Even if a Gardevoir comes out, you have a ton of play there. In that case, you've lured it out. Malamar can then sweep the rest. For all of these, Alolan Raichu can be a bit of an issue. Just a bit. I've put it there because I wanted to put something in the core breaker section, but really, like, both of these, Gardevoir and Raichu, aren't really core breakers, right? They are Pokemon that do like okayish versus both. I would say a Raichu can be kind of scary against these 2, because a Wild Charge basically knocks out both. But, you know, both can also almost one-shot with a Foul Play or with a V-Create. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. Previous team was extremely charge move heavy. This next one is just gonna be fast moves all the way. Basically, Claydol with Mud Slap and Shadow Charm Gardevoir. There's basically nothing that beats these 2. The anti-Charmers, they all lose to Claydol. The anti-Claydols, like Malamar mainly, all lose to Gardevoir. So yeah, there's only one like real core breaker, that's Cresselia, but it still doesn't do amazing. It can beat Claydol with like 2 Grass Knots, and you survive a Shadow Ball, so it's fine. And you also beat Gardevoir in every single even shield scenario, even with 2 shields, because you're just that bulky. You can survive the charms and get to enough charge moves to knock out Gardevoir and both of their shields. However, like Cresselia gets so low that it wouldn't be able to beat Claydol after. So it is a bit of a core breaker, but it can't beat both. So really, there are no real actual core breakers out there. So just pair this core with like a solid pivot, a solid safe mon, like a Bronzong or a Galarian Rapidash, and you will be set. If you want to be extra toxic, you could even go with a secondary Charmer, something like a Charm Wobbuffet, Charm Gothitelle, or Charm Gallade. Can you run that Gardevoir and Gallade? I think you can, right? Not sure. But yeah, that could work too. However, like Galarian Rapidash is just a much safer pivot. Like this bottom team right here works as follows. Claydol in the lead. You don't face an Anti-Fairy. Then you switch into Galarian Rapidash, lure out the Anti-Fairy. take some shields maybe with a Mega Horn, or maybe take him out with a Body Slam Bait Mega Horn combination. Bring in Claydol. And once, you know, their Anti-Fairy is gone, Charm Gardevoir just... Actually, don't take Switch. Actually, always save 2 shields for Charm Gardevoir in that case. This top team, we got Charm Gardevoir lead, which is just gonna, like, win a ton of leads. And then whatever they switch in, you got good responses to in the form of Bronzong or Claydol, probably. But if you have a bad lead here, you want to switch in Bronzong. It's a very good pivot in this meta. Probably lure out a Malamar, since that's the best answer to Bronzong, or maybe even Claydol, but I would assume mostly Malamar, and then once Malamar's gone, Mudslap Claydol might be able to finish the job. So, this is a very fast and heavy team, not one I usually like to showcase, but it's gonna be extremely strong. So, if you're not gonna run it, you better be prepared for it. Anyway, that was it for today. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know if I missed any Pokemon down in the comments below, and also let me know what team you're gonna run. I would love to know. Thank you very much for watching. See you next one. Good luck, Bell Stringers.